Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. It looks like we've got a smaller crowd this evening, but that's fine. I heard from several folks that they wouldn't be able to make it today. So thanks, Dylan, for letting us record, and we'll send the recording out to folks tomorrow. Um, yeah, so welcome week 3 of Sprout School. And tonight our guest speaker is Dylan Upperman, who is a member of this cohort and a graduate student at WVU. And I'll let him share a little bit more about his background. And we'll hear tonight the work that he's doing for his master's degree.
All right. Go ahead and share my screen. Make sure I can do that. Okay. Everybody see? Let's see.
Looks
All
good.
right. Yeah, so this is me. I am actually currently a graduate student at West Virginia University. I'm in geography. It's my second year studying there. I actually completed my bachelor's at WVU as well in environmental soil and water sciences. Um, There you can see me happy and graduating from that. Uh, yeah, and some of these other pictures I kind of took on various farms that I've worked at, either in my undergrad or graduate work. But yeah, I'm currently a community engaged research assistant at the Center for Resilient Communities at WU. And I'll get into kind of what that means here in a little bit. But very broadly speaking, my research interests are in what I like to call pathways into the food system. So kind of looking at the way that young people are getting introduced into ideas around the food system through educational initiatives. So, something like the farm to school program. Um, and the current projects that I'm working on at the center have to do with the farm to school program and our Appalachian Food Justice Institute, which I will get to in a little bit as well. But yeah, so let me see if I can fix this. Yeah, so the Center for Resilient Communities is basically a research hub at West Virginia University. We're based in the Aberley College in the geography department. But we're basically dedicated to community engaged research and educational programs that connect interested students to community partners throughout West Virginia and the Appalachian region. And our broad goal is basically to build more just, equitable, and vibrant communities and support our community partners that are kind of, doing that in the field. And we have three broad areas of research interests. Um, and what these are community economies. So kind of looking at kind of alternative economic development models, environmental justice and climate action. So looking at some environmental based problems in the state and the region and what people are kind of doing about them. And food systems transformation. So anything from the production to the consumption of food in the state and the region. And this food system transformation areas where I fall into. And I specifically work in the food justice lab. So the lab's kind of like a little subsect of the center. And it's led by Dr. Joshua Lones. But yeah, what the food justice lab is, like the title says, we're focused on food justice. What that means is we're kind of an action-oriented research center focusing on some of the root causes of inequalities in the food system, and what we can do to kind of create more equitable food futures with the underlying basically research question is how we can build and support grassroots capacity to advance the food justice movement in Appalachia. And I stole this little diagram from one of Josh's presentations, but I think it's kind of like helpful to look at the visualization of the process that we go through in the lab. And the little circle is kind of like the cycle, the yearly cycle that we kind of go through, basically with the ultimate goal of partnership development. So obviously we engage in research and public engagement with the ultimate goal of developing community partnerships. And as that circle indicates, we go through research, learning, um, planning, and ultimately, hopefully, some sort of praxis or policy orientation to implement change. But yeah, it's the cyclical nature. I think it's a helpful visual. Um, yeah, so what does food justice and food security actually mean to the center, to the food justice lab? And how are we kind of engaging with these concepts? So, food justice, as the Food Justice Lab defines it, is the right of all people at all times and in all places to gain and maintain access to the resources necessary to produce or obtain affordable, safe, culturally appropriate, healthy, and nutritious foods. So it's a little bit of a mouthful, but I think it's important. Like a lot of pieces in here are important in defining food justice. So obviously an all-encompassing definition, all people, all times, all places. Um, and the idea that it's both the production and procurement of food. So thinking about growing food in this subsistence manner, but also having the ability to go to the store and buy food. And all the qualifiers listed there, affordable, safe, culturally appropriate, healthy, nutritious, those are super important as well when thinking about food justice because, it's not enough to really just have like a Dollar General for providing food for a community. In terms of health and nutrition. So thinking through those kind of qualifications in food justice is super important to the lab um, to kind of get at these root causes of things. But importantly, too, we like to think of food justice as this social movement. So not necessarily like a static state of being, but more of a dynamic like movement towards something. And the social side of things is like to connect other people as well. So what this means is that food justice can confront inequalities in the food system. It can recognize histories of trauma and inequality in a state or a region. And as a movement, its ultimate goal is to organize and reshape food policies at various scales. Um, and this kind of works towards to achieve a state of food security. And as we define food security, it pulls pretty heavily from the food justice definition, but it's the state of having reliable access to affordable, safe, culturally appropriate, healthy, and nutritious foods. So food justice is kind of a means to achieve the state of food security. And I like to talk about food deserts here as well because it's more of a common term that I think people are a little bit more comfortable with that we've heard of before, especially in West Virginia. So food security is kind of like the opposite of what we can consider a food desert or a food insecure area. But important to note here too is that areas of food deserts or food insecurity aren't natural as like the term like desert might indicate. They're created basically by policy choices, by like economic processes. Um, in uh, saying that, it basically is to say we can do things to make these food deserts, go away. We can do things to fix food insecurity and achieve food security, as they've been created. So these are some more examples that I've pulled from Josh's presentation as well. We have an online program called FoodLink that kind of um, has a bunch of data to indicate food security, food insecurity in the state of West Virginia. So these are just two examples of that, basically highlighting some food security programs like SNAP and WIC, but also the state of food accessibility in various parts of West Virginia as well. And you can see some areas with very low access or some areas of very high access. And a lot goes into these. I'm not a huge mapper, so I don't really know the intricacies of, creating a map like this or some of the data that's in there. But I think it's a good example to kind of visualize what we mean when we mean food accessibility and food security. Um, yeah, just a helpful visual in thinking through what needs to be done and where, and what is being done and where. And another more, I guess, cheerful example, we run nourishing networks at the Food Justice Lab, which is basically community organized events to kind of go through some barriers to food that communities are facing, but also some food access initiatives that communities have the opportunity to engage with. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into all of these things, but it's a whole kind of curriculum that goes into what can be done to basically improve food access and achieve food security. And all this is on the website as well. If anybody wants to look into any of these things further, I can um, drop the link to the website in here as well. Um, but yeah, so this kind of leads to my particular work within this lab and within these things. So like I said, I'm working on a farm to school project right now with Dr. Josh Lones and a representative from the Office of Child Nutrition. We're basically trying to understand, like, from a statewide perspective, what barriers and opportunities are in the program in the state, what is working, what isn't working, why isn't it working, what can we do in the future to better improve this program. And a lot of this looks like interviews with nutrition directors and producers and school staff. We also just made a statewide survey that we sent out to child nutrition directors. So if anybody knows of any child nutrition directors that in the state, let them know to fill out the survey that Melinda sent out. Shameless little plug there. But yeah, the ultimate kind of idea around this farm to school project from the food justice lens is looking at it through procurement. So trying to connect local producers to local schools as a means to work towards food justice and achieve food security. Um, and I think the program is a really good way to think about small local efforts to take these steps needed to achieve food security. Um, and like I said, we're looking at barriers there. There's obviously a lot of things that kind of get in the way of that impact food security, but there's also a lot of opportunities. And I think this program, like we were talking about last week, as a win-win-win kind of thing for the farmers, the students, and the schools, I think it's a really good way to kind of to look at the program and think about how that contributes to food security at a small scale, but also a statewide scale. Um, yeah, and I love being a part of this group of people to think through these things as well. Um, like I said, food justice is this movement that I think we're all a part of through this farm to school project. And I think really looking at any way to improve the opportunities there in the future is vital. So again, um, reach out to me if you know of any nutrition directors or have any um, yeah, any questions, comments, concerns? We're in a really exploratory phase with this project right now, just trying to understand. So, yeah. Also, too, as a little, this is more of my master's work, a little like side project kind of thing. But it's something that I'm going to hopefully defend to graduate. It's this Appalachian Food Justice Institute. Um, and what this is it's a like summer program with leadership training designed to introduce youth in Appalachia to these ideas of food justice and food access while providing like hard skills in community organizing, food access, and food policy. And we've ran this for several years in the past. It's a summer-long program, like I said, and it's taken various different shapes throughout its history. In the past 2 years that I've been a part of it, I was an intern when I first joined it through the center. So I did just like farm work with a local farm. And this past, I guess last summer of 23, I was more of a mentor and manager of the program. And it was this like experimental approach to introducing students to various aspects of the food system while working as interns as well. So it's a 12-week program where we got interns basically connected to community partners and farmers to get them basically out and working while also trying to teach them holistically about what the food system is in West Virginia and what that looks like. And it was funded through USDA Higher Education Challenge grant, I think, these past 2 years. So we had a little bit of flexibility to be more experimental with it. But I say that just to say that the grant expired, so weren't able to run this program last summer. So part of my basically job in looking at it is to understand how we can make it maybe a little bit more self-sustaining without grant support, or how we can get more funding for it, um, or how we can kind of incorporate it maybe better into the university curriculum so the university can help support it. But yeah, this little picture is the cohort from the summer when I was in 23 when I was a mentor. But I do have a little story map that I would like to share with y'all because it just like illustrates this example. Um, so let me see if I can open it here. Yeah, I'll just scroll through this one. And this kind of falls out of the purview of farm to school being a university curriculum, but I think it's still a really good example of a way to integrate a food system curriculum into an educational setting like the university. So thinking through what this might look like in a high school or middle school or even elementary school setting, I think is important. And we learned like one of the key takeaways from this was it's really helpful for local farmers to get engaged in educational capacities, both like from a labor standpoint. So like the interns here were able to help with some farm tasks. We had like we had a good group of interns that were like ready and willing to do work, but also from an educational standpoint, from the side of the farmers, they learned a lot about their farms. They learned a lot about the university. The university learned a lot about farming in a local context. But yeah, so kind of just thinking through this as an example of this intersection between local farming and education. And for the sake of time, again, I'm not going to belabor these points too much. This is a pretty long story map. Um, yeah, this is just a brief intro. So some of these interns were great. I loved them all. They came from diverse backgrounds and with diverse career and professional interests. Um, And the idea behind this curriculum was to make it as holistic as possible and look at like every aspect of the food system from production to aggregation to distribution to processing, everything from growing it to eating it, because the students were interested in all of these things, right? So Maisie, for example, was interested in agroecology, so she was really interested in growing food. Wyatt was into international development, so he was thinking, how can we use the food system as a means for economic development? Uh, yeah, Trevor, it was an environmental side of things, so production. Heaven was really into food sovereignty and like control of the food system and who was making the decisions, who's in control of the food system. Um, Emily, I think, was horticulture, so again, more production. But we had a pretty wide range of academic interests, which really made the entire internship experience very fruitful because we had various perspectives to aid in the discussion of the food system, what that looks like. And the core of the educational side of things was led by Dr. Josh Bolones. Like I said, he's the head of the Food Justice Lab, but we ran through basically a week-long um, seminar introducing these students to food justice, food sovereignty, the entire food system, agroecology, all of the necessary components of the food system from the start of the internship. And yeah, I really like these. We made like little, I think Josh called them zines, but yeah, we pulled like little pictures from magazines and kind of connected them all together as a way to kind of illustrate various aspects of the food system. So this was the group that I worked with, and we kind of were looking at what food access looked like and what knowledge around the food system looked like, and some of the negatives and some of the positives. And it was a fun little exercise basically to like accumulate all the knowledge into some form of artistic expression. And for a little bit of context to the story map as well, I had the interns basically make it themselves. During the entire process, they were tasked with taking notes with everything that they were doing and reflecting on things throughout the whole program. And to make this story map, they basically just took what they were writing in their journals on a weekly basis and just plugged it in and went. So throughout the story map, there's these little quotes from the interns, basically on how they what they learned, how they felt about these things. Again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to really go through these, but I can also drop the link in here if anyone's interested in looking through this in more detail. But I also wanted to show this story map too, because I think it fits in really well with our conversation 2 weeks ago about asset mapping, because a core feature of the story map is this geographical side of things and mapping basically where we've been, what we have access to, what we can do kind of in the future. So this first one is basically just a broad overview as to where the internship program took us. So obviously Morgantown, where the center is located, we had an urban farm affiliated with the university that we had interns work at. Mount Harvest Farm is one of our closest community partners that we've worked with a lot through this program in the past. It was a really great addition to this program as well. So we had a few interns work there throughout the summer. Garrick Growers was Farmers Cooperative based out of Maryland. We did some work with them earlier in the summer, basically looking at what a cooperative is and kind of like how they fit into the local food system. We did a little bit of work with the university-owned organic farm. They're based out of the Davis College of Agricultural Sciences, so not really in the geography realm. So it was a bit difficult to kind of coordinate stuff with them. But we had a few fruitful days there. It was really interesting to learn about the research side of things. We did some work at the farmers markets. yeah, I think the rest are just other community partners that we worked with as well. So we try to do as much work with local farms as possible. And luckily, through just other connections, we knew these people that we could get the interns out to help. And like I said, we try to look at various aspects of the food system. So we went to the food bank to look at what um, distribution looked like from on the food bank kind of side of things. Food Innovation Center. It's a new center, so super interesting. I won't get into details, but this is a new Food Innovation Center in Morgantown. More work at WU, more community partners. We went to a produce auction, and we actually had an overnight trip to Baltimore and Pennsylvania to look at what like urban farming and what an urban farm alliance can look like, and the Rodale Institute to kind of understand large scale organic production. So like I said, very, very holistic, broad kind of overview of various aspects of the food system. But some of the stuff that we got into in doing those things, like with the auction and the food bank and the urban farming, kind of opened the interns' eyes to what the food system like looks like on the ground. Because a lot of the things being learned and taught aren't necessarily correlated with local or regional contexts. So kind of going to these different places and these talking with these different people really applied this like regional sense of the food system in Appalachia, which we found very helpful for the interns, and it was super interesting from my perspective, even just being a mentor and manager to get out there and talk to these people. Yeah, so the rest of the story map just kind of gets into a little bit more details in a timeline sense. You can just scroll through the pictures to like the visuals. But yeah, I want to get down to the curriculum side of things because we kind of oriented a bit differently given the need for a holistic integration of food system education. So I might kind of scroll past these here. This picture's super cool. This is the urban farm. It's a neat picture. Um, yeah, so we had a few weeks of kind of like warming up to the food system work and curriculum and kind of like thinking through what the food system was on ground. But come week 5 is kind of when the curriculum discussions started, and we wanted to orient the educational side of things to be not as like specific or focused as the week-long seminar was from the start. We wanted to be a little bit broader to think through how the food system contributes to broader change, not just related to food and farming. So the first discussion was basically around community. What does community mean to you? How does food and farming contribute to the broader community that you live in? Um, yeah, and this discussion was really eye-opening, I think, for the interns because it was the first kind of like connection between this specific food system thing and broader, society. So this was a really interesting discussion. I think it paired really well because it's saying we went to the food bank and thinking through how institutes like the food bank contribute to community development and assist in community access to food. Um, yeah, and like I said, these were kind of broader terms. So thinking through what accompaniment means. These interns were placed with community partners throughout the course of the summer, where they worked directly with these community partners and accompanied them. We like to use that term in the field, thinking through what this process basically looks like. So not just specific to the food system, it's like how are we working in a collaborative capacity with other people to achieve a certain goal. Um, and all these again were discussion based. So I gave them like a little prompt. I was like, this week, think through what accompaniment means and looks like in the field. They took notes. We came back and discussed. Um, yeah, and I like the style of it because the interns had a lot to teach me too. Like I facilitated these discussions, but some of the stuff that they came back and told me was kind of like eye-opening as to what they perceived accompaniment in the field and what that meant to them and their partners. Yeah, so really, really fruitful discussions from that. And kind of in between these things, we still did work with community partners. We had really long work days. We went to Evans Knob a lot, really great farm. Yeah, and like the core of the educational, I guess more of like a complement to the education was this hands-on learning. So it's like we're doing all of this discussion and stuff in class, but it's like how are we applying these skills to the field and helping our community partners. And a lot of this took the form of just work days basically on the farm, which the interns loved as well. I personally love it too. That's why I'm really interested in this stuff. I like getting out there and getting my hands dirty. And I think these programs are a really great way to do that. And it reinforces some of the learning that's being done in the classroom. Yeah, the next one was development. So thinking through what the process of development looks like from both a personal standpoint, but also a community standpoint. So how are we developing as agents of change in our communities? How are we contributing to community development with our partners? Um, yeah, all that good stuff that relates to the food system, but also a little bit broader as well. Some more pictures. Oh, this was super interesting too. We talked about this was very new to me as well. This is a little side note, kind of tangential, but we talked about American agrarianism, which is like the philosophical underpinnings of growing food in America, which was really interesting. It's not something like you really consider as part of the food system, like these like ideological, like how are we thinking about farming? But Dr. Sam Horrocks actually like teaches this. He is a farmer, but also like taught this at university. So he was really helpful in facilitating that discussion. And I think it kind of just highlights like the way that taking this experimental approach to education can lead to new things that you don't even think about in the first place. We kind of just got in contact with Sam like through mutual contacts that we know. And we went out there and he's like, "Do you guys want to talk about agrarianism? Like, what is that?" Yeah, so kind of just being as impromptu really as possible with it proved to be, I mean, it was messy at times, but it was like really, really cool and it kind of aligned and we could learn things together. We also helped him put up this entire fence row, kind of in return for his little lecture with us. So it was a nice little reciprocal moment there. We're kind of nearing the end of the internship, so we kind of started thinking about yeah, like what can we do with the stuff that we've learned and what we've done moving forward? And a really core, like fundamental educational piece of the center, the CRC at large, is this idea of developing agents of change. So like by the end of the educational curriculum that these students go through, the hope is that they can see themselves as contributing to change in some way, shape, or form. See themselves as protagonists in their story of community development. Um, and yeah, we try to do this like in an organic way where it's not like we're just saying, "Hey, now you can do all of these things," but it's more of like they come to this consensus together. Like we've done these things, we've learned these things, and we can see ourselves through this process, growing and learning and making a difference in our communities. So by week 8 of this program, we kind of wanted to have that discussion and see where the interns were in terms of that. And the hope is that they think they came away with a lot. Um, we had a lot of moments of reflection around these times. Um, yeah, it was really kind of helpful to think through the entire internship program as well. Um, yeah, we talked about scale, and this was like a little side kind of thing because we had um, this overnight trip to Baltimore to look at the urban farm, like I had mentioned, and also the Rodale Institute down here. So we want to talk about scale as it related to the food system, because in an Appalachian context, a lot of times we think of a smaller scale just given the geography of the land. But kind of getting out of that context and into a big city like Baltimore, or a really flat, sprawling, large-scale agricultural complex like Rodale, just to kind of contextualize what the interns were learning and experiencing and where we were going kind of to compare and contrast what Appalachia looks like relative to these other things. So the scale discussion was kind of like a little add-on given this overnight trip, but the trip was super cool in and of itself. I think the interns really learned a lot, and it was again one of those moments where it kind of just came together. Um, kind of randomly. I'd gone to Rodeo before and I knew they did this field day and we worked with Dr. Nikki Hoffman. And she had connections to Baltimore and the farm alliance that they had there. And they were doing stuff on a similar day. So we're like, well, how can we make this like a big thing that we can have the interns do and go through and like really solidify the learning we're doing in this context, but also kind of step out into this broader realm. So that was super cool. And that was like the very end of the internship program. So it was almost like this celebration of sorts too. Yeah, here's that picture. It's kind of the big cohort. And we had some students from the organic farm. The Davis College at WU has their own summer-long internship where students work on the organic farm. They came to the Rodale Institute as well, so it was really cool to see them there and get to hang out and talk with them that whole day as well. Yeah, and then we kind of just end with a summary of the work, some reflections. I like this map too as an asset map, thinking through kind of where we've been, because these are all connections that we had made in the process. So thinking through like what that actually means in terms of the curriculum, and what that means going forward. We know all of these people, we've worked with them. How can we kind of utilize these as assets in an educational setting? Moving forward, like what can we do in the future with these people and these communities? So this is another just yeah, another map basically. Art makes it really easy to make these maps. But I actually like printing maps out and like drawing on them physically. So I might do that with this for my asset map. But I think it's a good example. I think it might help visualize some of these things. Yeah, and as I had mentioned, the interns made this entire story map themselves. So they added like little pictures and reflections and kind of like what they wanted to do in the next step of their academic and professional career. And I thought it was really touching to be honest, because this was after 12 weeks of work and learning, and they had grown so much, and it was really just a beautiful experience. But yeah, I'll leave it there. I could yap on about this for a while. Like I said, this is my um, research project basically to graduate. So I'm trying to think through how to make this thing last. But yeah, I mean, I'll open up to any questions, comments, concerns with any of that.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. That was terrific. And I hope that through your research, you find a way to make a program like this last. Because I think you were talking about it earlier to Jenny and me, and both of us left and we're like, wow, we just want so many people who are interested in the food system to go through a program like that, because of the way that you guys have organized it around reaching out to community partners and focusing it in like theory, but also practical experience. So, yeah, very cool.
Thank
Um,
you. Yeah. I mean, I think it was super important to the interns too, because like all of them have basically said like they don't get this holistic education of the entire food system. They kind of learn through like ad hoc pieces that just, come together over time. But like a program like this was really eye-opening because you kind of get the entire thing. Um, yeah, it's just tricky to maintain these summer programs that kind of operate outside of, the university walls, but we're working on it. I'm hopeful.
well, good luck. And as you were talking about all of this and helping people find pathways into the food system, I'm curious, what was your pathway into the food system? What got you interested in this work?
That's a good question. So in my undergrad, I was really into soil for whatever reason. I had a weird windy path kind of getting there. I started with engineering, I didn't like it, and then I went to environmental science, and then I met this like nutty soil professor who I just loved. Um, and it kind of opened my eyes to like the power of farming. So I really wanted to like pursue that in any way. I started working with this horticulture professor who did like research and like small scale methods with like fruit. But I wanted so I did that in the summer, and people that are outside of the university, and people that are feeding their community, and I want to see what that looks like. So that led me to the center. They have a spring long internship program that I was a part of, and they placed me with Mount Harvest Farm, who I continued to work with for a while. And Mary and Chico, they're great. They were really the ones that kind of got me into this local food production and like the community engaged part of farming. Um, yeah, so I just stuck around at the center trying to do that as much as possible. And that one thing led to another, one project led to another. I stuck around for grad school. And then, yeah, I was in charge of this program in the summer of 23, which really kind of got me passionate about like the educational side of things and the pathways that we can help young people get involved into the food system. Because I think it's super powerful and food and farming is a great, like everybody eats,
Yeah.
everybody knows of farming. It's a great way to engage people into development initiatives. And it's just a good way to get outside and, doing like hands-on learning. Uh, yeah, so this program really got me passionate about that. And then since then, I've just been, pursuing it with the center ever since. So, yeah,
That,
I
yeah.
hope to graduate and get my PhD and continue it. So that's the future. We'll see. So it's awesome.
Well, yeah, that's awesome. And I like, yeah, thinking about your research, it is so rooted in partnerships. And one of the next like parts of this course will be thinking about forging community partnerships as we start to think about implementing farm to school projects. And so I'm just curious, like, if you have any tips on forging those partnerships, maintaining partners in the food system.
Well, like I said, like this program really taught me to be as fluid and dynamic as possible.
Yeah,
Because these partnerships just kind of came about organically.
yeah.
So we would go to one farm and they're like, "Oh, have you talked to so and so from this farm?" And we're like, "No." So we reach out and then we go there and learn so much and do these cool things, and then it's like this snowball effect. Like they know more people. Um, so trying to like incorporate as much flexibility, I think, into the programming as possible is super important, and like leaving room for those organic relationships but in terms of like maintaining them too, it's a bit tricky given like the institutional dynamics and the pressures that we're all under to really maintain these relationships. But what we try to do at the center is to be as like mutual and reciprocal as possible. So our we don't want to just like extract information from our partners and then, be done with it. We want to contribute to what they're doing and help with what they're doing. So they can help like teach the students that we work with, or they can help with the research that we're doing. So I think like having reciprocity and like a mutual relationship with the partners at the core is also fundamental. Which again, it's easier said than done. Like there's a lot of things that can get in the way of that, but really trying to just orient your relationship and your thinking towards that. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Good tips. Yeah, reciprocity is certainly something that will come up as we talk about team building. So, yeah, that's awesome. And then, as you were showing us those maps from West Virginia Food Link, which I learned about last year through talking to Josh when we pulled a bunch of partners from around the state of West Virginia together to kind of talk about the exact same thing you're focused on with your research with the child nutrition directors. How can we enhance farm to school efforts in West Virginia? And I was just curious, like, what do you think from the work that you've done and the work that the Food Justice Lab has done, what are some of the biggest challenges that West Virginia communities face when it comes to increasing food security and food access?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because like the first go-to answer is always money. Like
Yeah.
the economics of these things just always get in the way, and there's a particular like orientation to funding projects that is based in like market ideology where you kind of have to participate in this super competitive either like grant search, or even to get the grant funding you have to participate in this competitive market. So money is always a problem. But I don't like want that to be the defining feature of the state is, being poor. Like I don't think that's, good enough. I think there's I mean, there's a lot of resilience. There's a lot of effort being done to kind of combat these things as well. So I don't like just saying like there's not enough money, we can't do anything. There's communities that are at the forefront of pushing food justice and food sovereignty forward. Um, I think too, though, I'm thinking through this as I go. One thing I've learned with the farm to school program is there's um, these like legislative barriers that kind of get in the way. So like red tapey kind of stuff that
Mm.
um, are in place but don't really help people. So we've learned a lot working with nutrition directors and farmers and schools is that the procurement process is really hindered by some of these legislative processes
Mm.
and kind of like having to jump through hoops, to get food into the schools. And it's like it should be easier than this. Like there shouldn't be these problems. Um, yeah, and in terms of local production too, because I've tried to like my fundamental belief is in the farmers. Like I said, I'm into soil, so I have like a weird kooky relationship with that. But there's not like a lot of people say there's not enough production in the state, like there's not enough farmers, not enough producers. Um, and again, that's for a variety of reasons, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think West Virginia is a great state to produce food in a good way. It's not like the Kansases or Nebraskas that have these big sprawling farms, but we have little pockets of really productive, sustainable, ecological farms. So it's thinking through how can we support those farmers? How can we engage with the markets that they're engaging in. And that's what actually led us to the farm to school program as a kind of like the state supported market between producers and um, children in the state. Uh, yeah, so I like to think about like what can be done, and I think just one step in this process is this farm to school program as a market outlet for farmers. Yeah, that was kind of rambly of an answer.
No, no,
Sorry.
it's perfect
Um,
because I always like when I ask about challenges, I always like pair it with and what gives you hope for the future. And I think you answered both of those questions together. And we like, yeah, with Sprout School, wholeheartedly agree that there's so much agricultural potential in this state, and helping, yeah, students see that is, yeah, something that we hope to do. And it sounds like you guys are doing that as well on a college level and thinking about how to do it as at a K through 12 level as well. So that's terrific. And I have asked a bunch of questions. So if other people have questions, I will, yeah, I would give the floor to everybody else. Okay. Well, I think I yeah, did the 7 seconds. I know that's what Mr. Rogers says is ask for questions and then really pause and give 7 seconds if you've got to hear questions that people have. But if you do have questions for Dylan later, yeah, I his emails included in the group of emails that go out to you all every week when I'm emailing about Sprout School reminders. And so you guys, yeah, can find contact information for other folks in this group that way, or always, yeah, shoot me an email and I'm happy to pass that contact information along. So thank you, Dylan, for being here. I learned a lot. I know that I'm really interested in exploring American agrarianism. Is that right?
yeah. It's a new concept to me. So I said it's something I haven't heard of, but it's actually like it goes deep. Like we started talking about like the Civil War of all
Wow.
things. So I mean it's like deeply rooted in American history. So really, really cool stuff. If anyone's just like curious about those things, definitely look into it. Um
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I certainly am. So, something more to explore. Thank you. And before we let everybody go, we'll just do a couple of announcements. And one is that our in-person Sprout School gathering is coming up in just a week and a half. We're so pumped. Jenny and I had a meeting this morning where we thought through what activities we're going to do. And so there are several fun hands-on activities centered around youth agriculture and nutrition. And then we'll have a locally sourced meal, and we'll get the opportunity to look at some farm to school efforts happening in Romney and do like an on-site farm tour. So, very much looking forward to that. And I have pulled up somewhere the link to sign up. So, I'll drop that in the chat in case anybody needs it. Um, and while I'm pulling that up, we'll continue with more announcements. So one other announcement is that we're 2 weeks into the like 1 month period to work on your asset maps. So I just wanted to check in and see if anybody has any questions about those. Okay, great. And you can always, yeah, shoot me an email if you've got a question. And then, yeah, next session, so 2 weeks from now, we will be talking about team building and Casey Withers, who is a part of our team here at Future Generations, will be joining us to talk more about that and share some about the work that he's done connecting with Hillsborough Elementary School and implementing some Maple programming there. So we're very much looking forward to that. And we'll also take a few minutes at the beginning of that session to kind of share asset maps in small groups and project ideas so that you guys can bounce ideas off of each other. So, yes, I'll send this via email, but just come prepared with like a little blurb to share about your asset map. Okay. Um, Sending the link. That was, and I'll send it out tomorrow too, in my follow-up email. So I think that's it. We'll say goodbye to everybody and thanks again to Dylan. And yeah, look forward to seeing you all next time.
Thank you. Sorry I missed that last slide.
Oh no, I'm glad that I had to. I'm like, I think I know all the announcements, but this confirms it. So thank you. Bye, everybody.
All right. Have a good
Bye.
night.